talk a little bit about the Roman PILUM and partially a response to Todd of Todd's Workshop. Hey folks, Matt Easton here, Scholar Gladiatoria. Now, many of you will know, any of you who follow my channel for any amount of time will know that I've done a bunch of tests and lobbing of my peeler. I've got two of them around. These are from Fabrica Cacti, incidentally. And I was absolutely delighted to find out from Todd that he was going to be doing some PILUM tests, as he's been doing recently. Now, first up, if you haven't checked those out, go and check out Todd's channel now. So I've obviously known Todd for a very, very long time, well more than a decade, and we've collaborated on all sorts of stuff. So I found out about those tests before they went live on his channel, should we say, and I was very happy because I've always been aware of the fact that I am by no means an Olympic javelin thrower or champion thrower or anything else. However, I did used to throw javelin at school, so I'm not a terrible thrower of javelins, but I'm clearly not a pro. So I was absolutely delighted to see that he has got a pro to throw things. Now, there's a few things that have come up and a few things that I wanted to mention about throwing a peeler and what I would like to see as a historian. And, you know, I met people like Peter Connolly and people like that when I was studying archaeology and history at university. I studied Roman military technology at university. I was very lucky to be able to do that. And one of the things that I've always thought about testing of these things is that we want to try as much as possible to try and introduce as many of the same factors that a Roman soldier might have when we're doing throwing tests. Now, this isn't in any way a criticism at all, because I think we have to have baselines and we have to have measurable things. But what I would love to see more of is more testing of this being thrown while holding a scutum, a shield, and potentially while wearing armour as well. Anyway, that aside, the main thing I wanted to talk about here was the wooden peg testing that's come up recently. These are the Marian Reforms, essentially where there's, I believe it's just one source, is saying that one of the reforms that came in was the introduction of one wooden peg in the construction of the PILUM. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, and if you've watched Todd's videos, you'll know all about this. A Roman PILUM is a iron shaft attached to a wooden shaft, and it comes via a tang. So whereas most spears are socketed, certainly in Europe, Japan, somewhat different. Actually, Japanese yari and naginata constructed more like this. But with the Roman PILUM, we essentially have a tang coming down inside the wooden shaft. We have a collar or ferrule, if you want to call that, up here to hold it in. And then you have two rivets or pins going through here. Now, one of the sources for the Marian Reforms basically says that one of these pegs was replaced with a wooden one, such that it rendered the PILUM unusable or unable to be thrown back at opponents. Now, I think there's a whole bunch of stuff that this raises which we haven't necessarily seen covered in videos yet. The first thing is source bias and source trustworthiness. So was this prevalent? Well, first of all, we actually have a lot of archaeologically found PILUM, and they have rivets in them. They have two rivets in them. We know this was normal. We know this was how most of them were constructed, and that's why most of them that we reconstruct have two rivets in here. In fact, there were later ones which lead into the angle, which actually are socketed, but anyway, that aside. Now, a lot of people in a lot of modern books have talked about this shaft bending and therefore making it unable to be thrown back at the Roman soldier who'd just thrown it. And I think, as I showed in my tests, that's probably not what these are for, primarily. The bending is a byproduct of trying to get it out of your shield. The primary purpose of this shaft is to penetrate the shield and penetrate the person behind it, because of course the length of this shaft corresponds rather conveniently to about the length that you hold a shield away from your body when defending yourself against a thrown spear. So in fact there are African spears in more recent history, for example the Samburu spear and the Maasai spear, which also have long shafts, and we know that those are to pierce through the shield. As a person throws their shield up defensively, the javelin passes through the shield and hits them anyway, or at least stands a chance of hitting them anyway. And I think the Roman pilum, that's absolutely what the primary purpose of this was. So we shouldn't necessarily expect this to bend on impact. The implication in some sources is that these bend when you try and extract it from your shield. So the first purpose is to penetrate your shield and penetrate you. The second byproduct might be that this goes into your shield, and in trying to get it out of your shield, maybe the shaft bends. And that while you're doing this, your Roman opponent charges down on you and shanks you to death with their gladius. So the kind of bending is a byproduct, I think, of trying to get it out of your shield. So now if we apply that logic to the wooden peg, my opinion is this. So first of all, from the actual text of the source, this shouldn't be a different pilum. The implication is that we don't have any sliding socket or anything that breaks a wooden peg on impact. The original source material is that they literally take a normal, regular pilum and they simply replace one of the pegs with a wooden one. So therefore, we shouldn't expect the wooden peg to be sheared on impact. And therefore, I would have possibly suggested that the test be approached from a different stance. I don't necessarily think that the wooden peg is supposed to break on impact, and moreover, just to go on a slight tangent, you wouldn't want that, because remember, the primary purpose of the pilum is to stab someone. Okay, I don't believe the primary purpose of the pilum is to render itself unusable. The primary that might be a secondary or a tertiary purpose. The primary purpose of the pilum is to kill someone, or at least put them out of combat. So therefore you want the pilum still to penetrate the shield as much as possible, with as much energy preserved as possible when it penetrates that shield and hopefully penetrates the person standing behind the shield. So you do not want your pilum to either break or bend on impact. You want the pilum to penetrate a shield and stab someone on impact. What happens after that? Here's where it gets interesting. So my argument has always been that yes, sometimes these shafts bend, but they bend when you're trying to get them out of the shield. So if we apply that logic to the wooden peg should break when you try to get it out of your shield. Now, if we imagine for a second, I'll just grab, so here we've got a sort of Viking era shield rather than a Roman one. I do have Roman scutum, but this is easier to handle for this purposes. If this is now embedded in your shield and you're like, oh crap, I need to get this out. So it hasn't wounded me, so it's failed in its primary purpose, okay? Now the secondary purpose is like, oh God, I can't use my shield properly while this is stuck in. How do you get it out of your shield? Well, one way you get it out of your shield, and trust me, I know this because I've thrown this in previous videos, I've thrown this into shields, is you put the whole unit on the ground, you put the shield down there, and you've got your javelin sticking out here, you stand on the shield, and you pull the thing out. And sometimes you have to wiggle it. Now in doing this, this shaft, this iron shaft, sometimes gets bent. But if you've got a wooden peg in here as well, even if that doesn't bend, there's a good chance in wiggling it out, the wooden peg will break. So here's my argument. My argument is those Marian reforms, if they are true, and do we trust the source? Well, I don't know. I don't know how much we can trust the source. Even if it was done sometimes, how much was it done? Was it done with all pila? Or was it only done with a few? Was it only done for a few years? Was it only done for 5 years out of, 200 years of pilum use, or from even more than that, probably 300-400 years of pilum use? We don't know, okay? So there's a lot of unknowns. But assuming it was done for, let's say, a decade of military service, my argument is that the wooden peg is not supposed to break on impact. It's supposed to break when you try and get it out of the shield of the person that this failed to shank. But my argument has always been that the primary purpose of the Roman pilum is to either go straight into someone's body or head, or it's to go through their shield and still go into their body or head. And that is why you've got this very, very unique design. And also remember that some heavier versions have a big old blob up here, a big weight. It kind of looks almost like a hand stop. And that is purely to get as much energy as possible for penetration. These aren't long distance items. If you want to build a javelin for throwing far, then look at a modern Olympic javelin, which is a hollow aluminium tube. If you look in the ancient world, you'll see types of javelin that are intended for throwing far. These are not intended for throwing far. These are close range, deep heavy penetration javelins with a great long iron shank designed primarily to kill someone or go through their shield and kill them or wound them anyway. Okay, so there we go. There's my conclusion. So this is a sort of response. I hope this is sort of useful for Todd and future tests. I would love to see some testing of the wooden pegs pulling these out of shields. I personally don't at all think that the wooden peg is supposed to break on impact. I think the wooden peg, if they were a real thing, and again, we don't know for how long, but assuming they were a real thing, they were supposed to break upon extraction, not upon going in, because on going in, this is a heavy, deep penetrating object, and you want it to still have heavy, deep penetration. If something breaks on impact, you're losing energy, and you don't want that. That basically renders the PILUM nonsensical, in my opinion. Anyway, I hope that's interesting. What are your thoughts? Do you think I'm totally wide of the mark on this? I haven't massively studied the Marian Reforms or the, you know, essentially the text sources which lie behind this. Maybe you know some more details. Maybe there's something I've overlooked. Maybe there's something I've missed or misrepresented. What are your thoughts? Get posting below. And hopefully Todd will see this and it might be useful as well. I know that they're probably not going to be able to do any more tests until the spring now, which is a shame. But maybe I can get together. I probably will be getting together with Todd actually fairly soon. Maybe I can get together with Todd soon and we can do some different types of testing which don't require a javelin thrower. Maybe that's possible. Anyway. Let's see. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope I'll see you back on the channel really soon. If you're not subscribed, please remember to click that button and click the bell for notifications if you haven't done already. Give us a like and I hope I will see you back on the channel really soon. And of course, check out all of Todd's amazing videos. I have watched every minute of every single one of them, and some of them I've watched multiple times because they're really, really good tests. And if you haven't seen my previous PILUM tests, they might be interesting as well. Just search PILUM in my back catalogue and you'll find those as well. I also have a Roman military playlist which you might be interested to look through. Thanks a lot for watching. See you soon. Take care, folks. Thanks for watching. We've got extra videos on Patreon. Please give our Facebook a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Cheers, folks.